It's amazing what AI can do when you have a disciplined pattern language for describing your organizational structure and process, which is what GlassFrog provides. You basically have an AI management consultant at everyone's fingertips. So even a frontline employee can say, I'm frustrated, here's what's going on, and just talk it out to an AI. And the AI will say, oh, okay, what we actually need to do, I recommend updating this role here with this new expectation and that process there. And this policy is getting in your way. Let's see if we can change that. And then do you want to push out a proposal to your team for comment and then to the boss to approve or whatever? The goal is to basically empower every worker to lead more like an executive, even at a more frontline with the AI's help.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this episode of the Liberty Ventures podcast. I'm Alexander McCoven, founder and CEO of Liberty Ventures. And in building this community of values-aligned business leaders, investors, executives, and entrepreneurs who are all committed to making the world a freer and more prosperous place, I can't imagine a better person to join the podcast than Brian Robertson, who is at the perfect intersection of this. One of those individuals who really understands what capitalism means and advocates for it, but also is working to make it even better, developing new approaches to it through Holacracy, launching businesses that are doing amazing things to make the world better, and just an amazing human being. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Alexander. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
So I kept that at a high level, and I always like to start by asking, if you're willing to share your story and journey with everyone here to better understand what's not only led to what you're doing today, but who you are today.
Yeah. Well, at the risk of starting a little too young, I got a pretty early start in my professional career. I started coding when I was 6 or 7 years old, somewhere in there. I learned to read on software development books. So my first early career was software development. I dropped out of every school I've ever been in. Worked in aerospace, and then eventually built my own software company. And that was decades ago now. But I used that software company as a laboratory. I had this sense that there's just got to be a better way to do this, to organize. From a software architect's perspective, companies are horribly architected, right? It just, they don't make it much sense. It's like looking at a top-down planned economy, right? And you're like, wait, how does this deal with complexity? Well, it doesn't. And companies, especially at scale, have the same kind of issues that we see in feudal empires, right? And yet you got to have some way of organizing and dividing out resources or whatever. So my experiment grounds became, how do I run things differently? Something that allowed more emergent order, more self-organization, and years of experimentation in that software company created what's now called Holacracy, which is a framework for running a company in a pretty different power structure. And Holacracy, I left my software company 16, 17 years ago now, launched Holacracy One, which took Holacracy to the world. It's thousands of companies. It's all over the map. I've got a book. There's a whole bunch of consultants out there now doing this work. This is pretty cool. And I have recently left that. I love Holacracy. I love the work. I run all my companies that way. But I moved on to a software company now called GlassFrog, which basically brings some of the wisdom and practices from Holacracy, bakes them into a software tool that makes them applicable, accessible, easy to use for even traditional companies, and just gives people radical transparency and ability to adapt, to integrate more self-organization, more emergent order, get more clarity of who does what, how things work, and all that stuff. And we're adding AI into it now. We're doing a capital raise, which is interesting. I'm an angel investor myself, and I've always grown all my businesses organically, customer funding. And this is the first time I've been on the other side of the table trying to raise capital myself, which is, it's fun, and it's a wildly different experience than being the investor. So that's kind of fun. So I'm building that, and then also building a psychedelic church is my other passion, and a whole community in Austin kind of built around that.
So you're doing so many incredible things. I want to dive into each one of those. And I love how in the beginning, you were just running a software company. And as you were going through that, created this new approach to organizing businesses. And you start to touch on the motivations there and the need to move past a feudal structure to a more emergent ordered model. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about exactly what that means. What is Holacracy for anyone who hasn't read the book, which I highly recommend to everyone? or isn't familiar with the concept.
Yeah, totally. So it's a different way of structuring an organization, and it doesn't use the traditional command hierarchy of managers. So that said, I say that, and people often get the idea that it's structureless chaos or whatever. It's not. It's more highly ordered than a management hierarchy. We just get to order differently in the same way that a market economy is highly ordered. We just don't get there through a series of top-down planned economic actions, right? We get there by having the right framework of rules. And then within that framework, people have a lot of autonomy to lead their own little pieces and transact with each other. And with the right framework of rules and the right freedom and the right constraints on that freedom, we end up with an emergent order that is more effective and better designed than any top-down designer can give. And we see the same thing in nature, right? The human body, favorite example. There are trillions of cells in you, and they're all organizing effectively together, cooperating, and yet there's no CEO cell telling the others what to do, right? There's no top-down command hierarchy of managers and subordinates, but there is order, there's structure. Every cell has its functions, its inputs and outputs, its relationships to others. They group together into higher order functions, right? Your blood cells, muscle cells, nerve cells, and the heart all form together this larger organ, which is just a part of something bigger. This is nature's way of scaling in the face of highly complex systems, right? It's autonomy at every layer, and then an emergent order framework. So holacracy is that for companies. And a simple, let me give an example to make it a little more tangible. Real true story. This is many years ago in my consulting firm. We had this issue. I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of conference keynotes, things like that. So I'm doing that in a role. Holacracy is a role-based system. It breaks down really clear roles with clear decision rights and clear constraints. And I have a role called spokesperson. And another role that works with me in our marketing team is our casting agent role, whose job it is to book me for talks, which means we get a lot of inquiries, build the relationship with the conference organizer, negotiate, make a plan. And what was happening for a while, at the end of her process, she built a relationship, negotiated, made a plan, she'd present it to me. And sometimes I would shoot it down and say, I'm not going to go to that conference. It's, not big enough or wrong market or whatever it is. And she felt so disempowered and frustrated. She had spent a lot of time and energy building a plan. I shoot it down at the end. So what happens in this case is every team in Holacracy has this governance process for updating the structure of the team, the decision rights per role, adding roles, adding policies, changing them, whatever. She goes to our governance meeting of this team and says, hey, I want to add an expectation on the spokesperson role that I fill. The expectation in this case was, I want the spokesperson to be accountable for documenting the criteria he's going to use for accepting or rejecting speaking engagements, and then sticking to that criteria. Because she said, if I knew the criteria in advance, then I could assess it myself before spending all that time and energy. I wouldn't waste time. And the Holacracy governance process, it uses a pretty cool decision-making process. It's a facilitated process, pretty efficient. It took about 2 minutes in that meeting for her to have a new expectation on my role. And then after the meeting, she was able to come up to me and say, okay, so when do you think you'll have a draft of that criteria for me? Give me an estimate. The interesting footnote to this story, I'm the founder of this company, seasoned CEO and business leader for many years. She was our newest hire right out of college. In what companies do you know where the newest hire right out of college in 2 minutes can add an expectation onto the founder and then say, when are you going to have that done for me by? I love that because it highlights it's not about the status, the egos, all the politics. Imagine how long that would take in many companies to get enacted, certainly more than 2 minutes, right? And in this case, it's not about that. It's about, she has a role. Her role has a purpose to pursue. It has some work to do. I have a role. We have expectations. She knows how to add expectations to my role. We have a clear protocol for how we interface, right, in the roles. And it's easy to update it and give more decision rights or more constraints to roles as we need to. So what you end up with is emergent order, right? That's not, nobody thought to top-down design and plan that. We just tried working together, and she realized, I need something different. And so she proposed it. And everyone in the company has access to that process, right? For their team and their roles. So the entire company becomes this living system. where people can propose changes to pretty much anything, anywhere in the company in a pretty disciplined process that keeps that super efficient. So you end up with an emergently ordered system.
I love this, especially because we implemented Holacracy when I was running Conscious Capitalism. We went through this process. And I think the important thing for anyone listening to understand is that the difference between Holacracy and traditional structures for organizations is that it's not based on a hierarchy or set of statuses that people have. It's based on those processes, those rules for creating new statuses, new expectations. And it encourages people to speak up and be able to do what's best for the organization of the business in order to grow it, so long as you're following the rules that have been established for how to go about doing that. And it makes it transparent for everyone. And as it doesn't empower them, it conveys that they're already empowered to do whatever's best within these rules.
Absolutely. If you need someone to empower you, what's it that say about the system you're in? You're in a fundamentally disempowered system if you need someone else to empower you, right? What Holacracy does is say, let's get off that game board and create an environment where everyone can find and use real power within a framework of rules to keep it safe and to make sure there's coordination effectively, right? So yeah, I love what you're saying. It's the system that's empowered now, not a boss who is empowering others.
Love the philosophy. You were successful in building up Holacracy before. Now you're separating GlassFrog, which was the tool you originally built for implementing Holacracy in companies. But as we've talked about before, you're seeing GlassFrog being used by companies that don't embrace the totality of Holacracy. This is just a tool that seems to make it a little bit easier for businesses to allow people to be empowered without going fully into this, right?
Yeah, we were actually pretty surprised. We built the tool 15 years ago was the first version. And we built it as originally just for our own consulting clients as a Holacracy support tool. We didn't ever expect anyone not doing Holacracy would be interested in it. And then Holacracy got pretty big, and we found a lot of more traditional organizations at least taking different practices and principles from it, which actually works quite well if you do it.
And actually, can you just list a few companies people would know that have implemented Holacracy or parts of it?
Oh, yeah. So Zappos is one of the famous examples in the US. You've got, I could actually name clients of GlassFrog that are using pieces of it, but not the whole thing. We've got Mercedes-Benz, big division, Mercedes-Benz, Danone, Accenture has a division, several, Siemens, several others. So companies,
Well-known names. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are others using all of Holacracy. There's thousands of companies out there doing that. But the thing is, I mean, it's a big ask for companies to radically change their entire power structure. So what we're trying to do with GlassFrog is allow companies to step into it and give them guide rails, use what works for them, what they need, and just get as much benefit as possible from a more empowered, more clear environment. And what the market really told us that they wanted that. We really didn't market the product at all outside the niche Holacracy market. And then we started getting these clients who were buying it and no interest in doing all of Holacracy, but they wanted different pieces. They wanted the transparency it gives, the agility. So we're now eventually we listened to that. And about a year ago, we spun out GlassFrog into its own separate entity. And we're adding, it's amazing what AI can do when you have a disciplined pattern language for describing your organizational structure and process, which is what GlassFrog provides. In other words, it gives you a framework for here's how you describe the decision rights, right? The constraints, the expectations. It's, all of that gets really clear in a standardized format, which AIs can then parse, interpret, and use. And you basically have an AI management consultant at everyone's fingertips. So even a frontline employee can say, I'm frustrated, here's what's going on, and just talk it out to an AI in GlassFrog. And the AI will say, oh, okay, what we actually need to do, I recommend updating this role here with this new expectation and that process there. And this policy is getting in your way. Let's see if we can change that. And then do you want to push out a proposal to your team for comment and then to the boss to approve or whatever? So it's really giving every worker, the goal is to basically empower every worker to lead more like an executive, even at a more frontline with the AI's help. And I'm pretty shocked. It's in beta right now. The AI functionality is in beta on this, and it's really cool.
And again, having used the old GlassFrog years ago, I'm really curious to see what the AI tool looks like now and how this is developing. And we could talk about that all day, but I want to actually focus on what it's like being in an entrepreneurial setting. Again, it's kind of not a new business because you've built GlassFrog before. It's been part of your old business. You're spinning it out, but you're going through the entrepreneurial journey, turning this into a new company on its own right now. And I'm curious what given your experience, what are you doing differently this time around than what you did before? Especially thinking about what you've learned that would be valuable for other entrepreneurs who are on their first, second, or third business right now could benefit from learning from you.
Yeah. Organizational clarity. I mean, however you get there, whatever framework you use or whatever, I think it's one of the things that entrepreneurs sometimes gloss over in service of just executing as fast as possible. And they end up doing everything themselves. Gets harder and harder to delegate. And when they do, the organization starts getting bureaucracy. It starts, everything just gums up the works as you scale. If you don't have really good organizational clarity, you know what you've delegated, what you haven't, who somebody needs to go to for what, when, why, how, right? Uh, it's if you over design that, you've got horrible bureaucracy. If you under design that, you've got massive meetings that are completely unproductive because everyone's just trying to build buy-in and consensus all the time. So there's this fine line there between the two where you have just the right lightweight, agile organizational clarity, just in time organizational clarity. Don't try to clarify everything, but when there's a fire to fight or when there's something new to do, instead of just doing it, figure out, okay, what's the pattern here? What's the process? How do I cleanly delegate here so I'm scaling and not in everything? That's been, I think, one of my hugest journeys is just how to really scale with clarity, with good, clean delegation of authority. And that's what Holacracy and GlassFrog are all about as well. But whatever tools somebody uses, I think that's just a fundamental need in business. And the other thing for me that's shifted a lot, I am shocked how different it is leading this company now versus my last 25 years of building other businesses of my own. This is, I've built several businesses now, but in the earlier businesses, I was much more like, I'm in the company so much more. I'm building things myself. I'm hands-on in various ways. And normally as an investor, I do a lot of angel investing as well. I like that. I want an entrepreneur or founder who is like really deeply in the business and building. And so it really surprised me to figure out at this stage in my broader career, I'm actually more valuable to the business, not doing as much of the operational leadership as I used to. And that's different for me, right? Now I know how to do that and I can mentor others at it, but I have a pretty freaking incredible network of just amazing people who have done big shit in the world. And um, I am so much more valuable to the business going out, not in, and networking and, meeting lots of really interesting people and doing podcasts like this and being a spokesperson and getting out of the way of others running the operations, building the product, all the things I would have been much more hands-on involved in the past. And I think for good reason. I'm not sure I recommend a first-time entrepreneur do it any other way, but after you've built a few, things change. I am better leveraged by working at a more external level and bringing things in to the company.
So what I'm hearing, to recap, is that organizational clarity is absolutely critical. You're building that in from the beginning, and it's easy for entrepreneurs to overlook that because we're building fast. The old Reid Hoffman saying that entrepreneurship is jumping off a cliff and building the plane while you're falling down. You feel like you don't have time for that, but it's absolutely critical if you're actually going to succeed. And secondly, you're perhaps in a different position in your career now than before. And so your best comparative advantage for the company is different today than it was when you were starting before. But it's really important for founders to understand what their comparative advantage is as they're building out the team and lean into that in order to make the company successful. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's awesome. And the other thing I'll add to the mix here is when I was younger and growing my businesses, there was a lot more charge, frustration, resistance in me. And now I have learned the massive business value of love and acceptance. Um, the more I don't fight anything, I don't resist anything, I just flow. Whatever is, whatever shows up, great. Can I love that too? And now what? Um, the more I can open my heart and deeply connect with real vulnerability with others in the business, the more I can find my way of just loving everything, to put it simply, right? The spiritual path, really. That's probably the single most transformative, valuable thing I've figured out as I guess, serial entrepreneur now is that is the power of love.
I really appreciate that and find myself learning the same thing as I get older. And I wonder if how much of that is just age and experience. And so you realize the power of it because you just see how powerful it is as you get older, you experience it. But is there anything that you think could help younger entrepreneurs accelerate that process and understanding that perhaps?
Self work, whatever you can do, work on your own consciousness awareness, whatever practices. There's a lot of different practices out there, from kind of meditation practice, different lineages there. But there's so many. It really doesn't matter specifically. But something that hones awareness and increases embodiment. And when I was a younger entrepreneur, I was a head mostly disconnected from heart and body. And now I feel everything in my body in a way I never did when I was younger. I'm deeply dropped into my body, noticing the subtle things going on in it. Heart is the lead now, not the the thing I forgot about. Head's still strong and in the mix. It's long term skill, but it's that kind of personal development. The anything that builds my capacity to fully show up with head, heart, body, all of it in the mix. The more my consciousness and awareness can sense just subtle things, subtler and subtler things. There's lots of different practices and movements there, but whatever it is, find something that works for you. I cannot cannot overestimate the potential impact from the founder, especially the founder's spiritual journey, spiritual path, by whatever language you want to use, but self-growth, self-development, personal growth, whatever. Work on yourself because that affects everything. When you show up at your absolute best and you show up loving and conscious and aware and just not resisting anything, flowing and adapting with everything, that sets a standard. It's like that. The whole thing about culture, we talk a lot about culture, and I actually think there's something misguided when we try to engineer culture. Culture isn't something that can be easily and effectively engineered. What it can be is modeled, right? So whenever I see, and there's a
Really good line to emphasize. Culture isn't something to be engineered. It's something to be modeled.
yeah, don't try to architect your culture. And I know I'm pushing against a lot of business wisdom out there.
Yeah, you are. But I think you're onto something here.
I'm happy to debate it with anyone. It's, and I've been there. I tried engineering culture for a decade and it was great. And I found a vastly better solution, which is be the change you want to see, right? Show up the way you want others to show up. That matters so much more than anything you do to intentionally engineer culture, right? Just live it and be it. That infuses everything. And then find other people who will live it and be it with you. And people that won't do it exactly like you. I think another mistaken goal in a lot of companies today is we try to get too much similarity. We define a set of values and try to get everybody, in the same set of values. But you know what's even more powerful? A system that has a deep, loving respect where people have loving respect of each other in it, and we can show up with different values and harmonize them for the sake of the purpose.
Because you still need that love and respect and appreciation. And there are certain foundational values that are important for even being able to achieve, right?
Yeah, I'd say maturity to make a distinction here, as opposed to a more horizontal set of just different values. There is a maturity thing that does matter. The ability to hold multiple values, for example, and not see it as inherently, conflicting, but integrate the wisdom of each. That's a maturity thing. That's a development thing. So maturity and development does definitely matter. But beyond that, I think we do a lot better in organizations when we find a way to integrate, to have cultural cohesion, not from a set of principles or values, but rather from modeling a certain way of being, a way of showing up. And it's okay if people model and be differently, as long as we have ways to connect across that. To when somebody does something I don't understand, or that triggers something in me, can I meet them with vulnerability, with compassion, with curiosity, with inquiry, and learn from whatever it is they're tuned into that isn't resonating with me, and vice versa, so that we can actually build something that integrates the best of both. The last thing I want is a company full of everyone with one set of values.
I love that, Brian. And, we're going in one direction with this, but I do also want to get back to the fact that you built your companies before organically. And, not many do that, or so often people think that as they're starting up businesses, they should just immediately seek outside capital. What advice would you give to any entrepreneurs in how to grow organically early on, especially if they haven't really put the plan together yet for that?
Yeah. Nothing matters until somebody sells something, right? Sell something first, and then figure out how you're going to deliver it, figure out what processes you need, build the infrastructure after the fact. But if you don't get that client revenue, you don't get the feedback loops from the clients. I find external capital. I'm raising it right now. It has its place for sure. It's going to help us accelerate this growth in a major way. And there's a danger to it. I'm so glad I didn't try to grow my first business with external capital, or my second for that matter. The danger is you break the feedback loops, right? Now you've got tons of money in the bank. You need to keep spending it and building without actually really listening. Can we sell this? Are the customers, writing the checks? And there's something about staying lean and hungry when you have to get that next customer. And, you've really got to listen to the market when you don't have external capital. And there's, things you just can't do without external capital. But I love organic growth. There's so much discipline that it bakes in, right? And so now my challenge is holding that discipline while also accelerating growth with external capital. And I feel quite ready for that now, but I sure wasn't 15 years ago.
So that is invaluable advice, and just so on point to make sure that as an entrepreneur, you're getting the feedback loops, and that it all comes down to what people are willing to pay for. You need to figure that out to be successful.
Yep, totally.
In the process of raising capital now for the first time, really, in your entrepreneurial career, what are you learning about this process? What's it like for you?
Yeah. As an angel investor, I often find it kind of cute when entrepreneurs seem to think that they're going to go from an initial meeting with me to a check in, a couple of weeks. Everything just takes longer. I've got businesses to run. They're not my highest priority. It takes a long time as an investor sometimes to write a check when it's not your full-time thing. And yet, nonetheless, on this side of it, it's always surprising me just how long it takes to collect that damn cash, even when you get the commitment. I've got a bunch of commitments, and we've collected a bunch of checks, but still, it just takes longer than I'd ever expected, even knowing it from the other side. So there's that. Also, there's something, I have a lot of entrepreneurial experience, a lot of years, a lot of entities, that really helps. I don't envy first-time entrepreneurs out there trying to raise capital. That's got to be tough. And in my case, I've got a lot of my own capital too, which I'm also investing, and that just, eases investors' minds when they see I have a ton of skin in the game as well. And, yeah, man, there's it's a lot I have going for me, not being my first show and having had some success before. It's not easy. And it's flowing, but, I don't know. It's easy, from the investor side to, critique, an entrepreneur's pitch and deck and all that. But from the entrepreneur side, it's much harder to do that for yourself. So fortunately, I have a lot of really close friends who are VCs or investors. So I built a team of them. I just called a bunch of friends and said, guys, I'm too close to this. Can you please tear apart my pitch and my deck? And that was so valuable. Really made it a lot better.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned that you're an angel investor as well. And the Liberty Ventures angel investor network is filled with people, some of whom have a lot of experience like you, some who are a little bit new. And I'm curious, what are some of the key things that you look for as an angel investor that other angels should be thinking about, or that you think would be valuable for them to be considering?
Yeah, well, I don't pretend to be, a world-class angel investor. I'm a world-class organization builder and some other things. I've done well as an investor, but it's not my core. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I will say this, for me anyway, and this may not be the right approach for everyone. I don't invest in stuff that I don't really understand and get pretty close to. So I stick to industries, products, whatever that I have some background in, or I'm close to in some way. And I tend to invest for myself more when I can also play an advisory role, just because I know how much value I can add as a mentor, advisor, board member, whatever. And that just makes my investment more likely to return. So that's one thing. Also, I mean, this is cliche, but the entrepreneur matters almost more than anything else. So I look for people, and it's very intuitive for me. I recognize a good entrepreneur when I see one. I might be wrong sometimes, but generally I have a pretty good sense of that. And I trust that, trust that intuition. Um, and, um, and, I don't know. That's beyond that. It's so much more intuitive for me than anything. I mean, I'll look at decks, of course, but I'm not doing a lot of due diligence. It's really intuitive gut feel, and that's worked pretty well for me. Um, but who knows? I will say that where I've gotten myself in trouble is chasing something out of FOMO. Every time I've invested in something because I don't know that much about it, but other people are, and they're closing their round soon. And man, I want to get in because man, these other people might know something I don't, and I lose money. Don't FOMO into an investment.
That is all incredibly valuable advice, Brian. Thank you. And last question for you to provide context. As I think, I always tell people, you want to meet someone, you want to learn something new. The best thing you can do is offer to get value first. Don't ask for something from them. Offer to do something. And for anyone who is interested in connecting with you or loves what you're doing with Holacracy, GlassFrog, the psychedelic church, or you're investing or anything and wants to connect with you, what's something they could reach out and offer to help you with that you would be excited by and would positively respond to?
I love it. The thing that comes to mind top of head right now is we're raising an investment round, and I'd love to connect with investors interested in AI SaaS companies. So if anyone can make a warm intro to, I'm not looking for any investor. I'm looking for ones that they can add some value beyond just the capital. Would love the connections. And then beyond that, more broadly with Holacracy, any opportunity to do more things like this, podcasts, read, a little bit more about this cool framework for running a company that's probably particularly aligned with our audience here, and the more the kind of people that understand the value of markets and emergent order. So any kind of podcasts or interviews or any opportunities like that, conference talks, I do a lot of that stuff, and welcome connections or referrals as well.
Fantastic. You heard it from Brian, everyone. If you're able to help out with the round that he's doing, or your values aligned, or could have platforms for Brian to join, reach out and offer it. Brian, I love you. I love what you're doing. So excited to have you in the ecosystem and to share all these insights with everyone. This was phenomenal. Really. Thank you.
Likewise, Alexander, I look forward to lots more years of connecting.
Me too.